Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our conversation. My name is Cullum Line. I'm the Youth Ministry Coordinator here at St. Anne's Parish. And with me, as usual, but in a different location.
I'm Father Matthew. I'm the pastor here.
Yeah, you get
so where are we today in this?
Yeah, welcome to my world. This is my little office. And we don't really have a name for like the big cozy chair, but you know,
but
feel
I'm
free
leaning
if you
back to have the nice distance, not to be really lazy.
There you go. Yeah, you lean
we're
back,
good
and
that
I
way.
think we still got our 6 feet.
But I'm struck looking at the decor in your office. I think a lot of family, a lot of Jesus, and a lot of Star Wars seems to be kind of the theme in this place.
Yeah, we got Mary hiding behind you, JP2 a little bit there. We got a little bobbleheads. I think it's like Poe Dameron, Han, and
Jesus.
Well, we got a bobblehead Jesus. You gotta have
that's
that as a youth worker.
Very nice.
And then
And the
family.
family.
Yeah, we're pretty eclectic in here, and that's how we
fair.
roll.
That's nice.
But sadly, or not sadly, it's a quite accurate portrayal of your local youth ministry. That is family, Jesus, Star Wars, Marvel. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's
painting picture. But we're kicked out of the living room because we have a high school girls small group that is gathering. We had to kind of record a little bit later in the day, so we jumped around and found a new spot.
Great.
And it's on St. Patrick's Day. This might come out maybe Thursday, but maybe Wednesday night. But happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Yes, Colin has some green on. Very nice.
I got to represent, as an Irishman, but I don't go too crazy. I'm kind of the Irish person who thinks I don't have to try hard. Like, I am Irish, so I got nothing to prove, really.
There you go. See, I have some black socks with green shamrocks on that I was going to wear, but I think Trudeau kind of ruined the showing off socks on screen, so y'all don't get to see my socks. I'm sorry.
You'll celebrate in some other ways.
Yeah.
There you go. It's a big week for feasts, for the
my
Irishman.
pen is green.
Oh, your pen is green. There you go. Well, technically, I gave you that pen, but
now we're
counts.
set.
It counts.
Yeah.
So we got Saint Patrick today, which is pretty excited.
Yeah.
And we got like a really rare, awesome kind of deal happening on Friday. So we have the Solemnity of St. Joseph on a Friday in Lent.
It's a big deal.
That's a big deal. And it's the year of St. Joseph. So
it's the year that the day we go up to 150 people at church.
Yeah, and we have Source too, live in person. So we're really kicking the St. Joseph year in style. I don't know if the government knew that when they, expanded for us, but
no, I don't think so.
We'll just say the Lord was looking out and said,
knew.
We'll make this happen.
Very nice.
Fun stuff. We continue this season of Lent, your kind of series here on building freedom.
Yeah.
Lots of good stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think the last couple of weeks have been more on the practical side of almost trying to think of some tools that our faith gives us to build freedom.
Sure.
And yesterday was the right ordering our desire, thinking about, is this good because I want it, or is it objectively good? And trying to unite those two together. Mm-hmm. And today, the tool I talked about in light of the readings was to interrogate your desire. And maybe to start off, I use the image of how sin comes to us, or temptation comes to us, of the image of it knocking on the door.
Yeah.
And I said, usually we think we have one of two options when sin comes in. Either we just let it in and give in, which of course is not good, or we slam the door and say no, which is the right thing if it works. But then I talked a bit, and maybe we'll talk a bit about this here, is why that isn't always the right response. It's just because it doesn't work. And what I say by that is we often have these sins that are habitual in us, that we're really stuck in, and we slam the door, but it somehow sneaks in the window. We say no, but somehow we end up falling into these sins again and again and again.
Yeah, I'd like that image, and just in my own life, but I know lots of people have kind of shared this idea of like, you can almost get to a space of sometimes hopelessness or frustration of like, I'm trying to fight, I'm trying to battle, I'm trying to slam the door, but somehow it gets in, right? And you can get into the space of like, well, they're going to get in anyway.
And it's hard to imagine life without it.
Yeah.
You just don't know how to stop
it's almost like impossible to see. I keep losing the battle, so I can never win it, And I just enjoyed how you laid it out, and I was telling you right before we record, I was like, I kind of had this image of like, and then they get in the window. And I was like, sometimes we might think of like, well, we slam the door shut, but we also have like the windows are barred and everything, and somehow, whatever the robber, whatever you want to use, still gets in there. But I was like, maybe it's more like, you slam the door shut and, your bay window is wide open.
Yeah,
with
it's not actually
screen,
that slammed.
Yeah. And so it's like this idea of like sin is sneaky, but maybe we're making it easier for sin than it needs to be, right? So this idea of like examining or whatever. But I just appreciate just to start of like the idea of, it takes courage to face it. And this is not an easy thing, and but to be intentional of not just letting history repeat itself, right? That there is some steps that you can do to try to break the repetition, or the cycle,
and where I find I run into this a lot as a priest, of course, is in the sacrament of confession, both going to it and receiving confessions. And it often has people come and they have their one sin they confess over and over again, and they're often quite embarrassed by it, but it's also sometimes they think they're the only person that happens to. Mm-hmm. So I just tell everyone that it's very, very common to have the one sin that you just seem to be wrestling with and not free from. So first of all, I don't think it's a unique thing to struggle with. And often I find people are almost ashamed or don't want to keep telling the same priest the same thing over and over and over again. But they're too, we know what it's like. We hear it from others, and we've been there ourselves, and often are there ourselves. So that's one thing I want to say for people. Don't be afraid to keep confessing it. And secondly, too, as you said, to not lose hope that freedom from this sin really is possible. Because sometimes we can just get a sense of resignation about it. I'll just do it, or I'll do it and confess it, and maybe that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
But we can't, the Lord has better for us than that.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And, I mean, you referenced, Romans 7, right? From St. Paul, and, talking about the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, and how I was like, yeah, man, how many of us have been there? But also his reliance, sometimes I read that as almost a begging of Lord, it is only your strength.
Yeah.
It's upon your strength that, I can.
And I love that he's just so honest. Maybe I'll just read a little bit of this from Romans 7 here. And this is St. Paul in the Bible saying, I don't understand my own actions. Who has been there? For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. That's pretty direct, right? And
he's not hiding his sin at all, right? He's been straight up.
I can will what is right, so I can desire what is right, but I can't do it. Haven't we been there? Hmm. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. But then how it ends, like you said, is thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. And the reason, how can he, why does he say thanks be to God at the end of that? Those despairing words.
Yeah, it is, he gets the big picture, and we know his story even of where he's come from and where he's going, and, the change that's been in there. And it's easy sometimes to read some scripture. Sometimes I can even go to that scripture when I want to feel horrible about myself, and I just read the first 3 sentences of that, and you're like, yeah, see, and then you stop. But
but the way it ends with thanks be to God, through Jesus Christ our
and
Lord.
That's even a simple thing we've talked about a few times, this Bible in a year thing, and Father Mike talks about that too. He's like, you just got to keep going, because sometimes you just want to stop or sit at a moment, and he's like, no, the story continues, and we'll come back to something or whatever. And it's the same thing with these readings, is to say, we are delivered. And then I think it was, the second reading, he had shared, and it just won the lives, is, brothers and sisters, once we were in darkness, now in the Lord you are light. And I just really love the line, live as children of light.
Yeah.
And, there's a promise, but there's also a calling. Right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
To say this is doable.
And why do we need to be told that? Why does the Bible have to tell us to live as children of light? Isn't that just a thing we'd want to do on our own?
We just don't do it. I don't know. This is a good question, but
sometimes I think is that we think we can't. We don't know what it is to live according to the light, and maybe too thinking that we're somehow either we're not worthy of it or we're afraid. And this is where I was hoping to go with the homily, is we're afraid to bring all of ourselves to the light. Maybe I'll try to present the parts of myself that I like. But that's really the challenge of this interrogating your temptation, is to bring those weaknesses, those hurts, those temptations to the light, not for the sake of giving into them, but for the sake of giving them over to Christ so that he can heal them and release us from them.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. And, when you bring it to the light, you're bringing it to the source and the power that can transform it and that can overcome it, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think, even back to that original question there of why do we struggle with that, is sometimes go back to the sneaky sin, I'll use that language, but also sin lies, the devil lies, and I think sometimes I'm very susceptible. Maybe it's personality traits or whatever, that I'm much more likely to live in the rhythms of my failure than the rhythms of my successes. Right?
Yeah.
Somehow failures speak much louder in my life than successes.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that's pretty human nature. Even they'll say if it's I go through weekend of masses, I might get 10 people saying like, "Great homily, Father," and then one criticism.
yeah.
And what am I going to be thinking about on Monday? It's
Yeah,
not the 10 compliments.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
I remember I gave a talk somewhere once, and a large crowd, and it got general kind of applause and affirmations. But before I even left the building, I got like a personal, I don't even know how they had me on Facebook, but like a direct message on Messenger that was like a total hater comment.
Oh, wow.
And I like knew the person a little bit, and there was some history maybe that would have like promoted it, but like prompted it, not promoted it.
Yeah.
But and it totally just like destroyed me,
That's what
and I
you
just
hold
got
to.
stuck
Yeah,
in there,
absolutely.
and like. And it took an outside person. Maybe that's why it's in the written, because the Lord knows you need these. And it was like my wife being like, "You're gonna let this one random online comment, destroy your day when 1,500 people clapped or whatever,
exactly.
like, and not
Yeah.
for your own thing." But he's like, "What are you putting power into?
Yeah.
Like, what are you trusting?" And I think to kind of get to where you go in the end of this is this sense of. Maybe not all of me, because I like Jesus' love and I'm good and beloved, but I think it's true. I think we all, in some ways, think some part of us is broken beyond repair. Right? Is God? You love me. You love 98% of me, but this piece, this is too
Not
rotten
lovable.
or too broken,
Yeah.
or this sin is too entrenched that it can't be removed.
Yeah.
But then we don't bring it forward, and so I just like that challenge, that you're bringing of say. Yeah, we have source, as confession, we're leading up to Easter, is to say like, and it was even a good reminder for me of like, what am I holding back?
Yeah.
Because most often the thing that I'm most resistant to bring to the Lord is the thing I need to bring to the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where, you said earlier that sin lies. And I think that's a big part of it. And one way that I've seen it a lot too, the lie of sin is when the temptation comes, when the temptation is knocking on your door, like the enemy takes all the shame away. And it's like, oh, this is a fine thing to do. But then as soon as you do it, he dumps all the shame on you again. And that's, I think, another one of the lies of sin was when the temptation comes, the lie is this is totally fine. And then once we give into it, the lie is like, who could ever love you now? Who could ever forgive you for this?
Yeah. Going back to
It takes away the shame, then it dumps it back.
Yeah, and I think of the idea of interrogating and someone coming at your door, and I'm trying to think of an example of like you have a hypothetical friend. Okay, I'm not calling anybody out who knocks on and shows up, comes to the party, and like comes in, doesn't ring the doorbell, doesn't take their shoes off, just like makes a mess, destroys your house.
Yeah.
And then they come back a month later for a party, and they're like, "Hey, I'm here for the party." And you're like, "Sure, come on in," right?
Yeah.
And then after they make a mess, then you're kind of like, "What the heck? They did this last
Why do I
time."
keep letting this guy in?
And there's a little bit in my spirit of like, fool me once, fool me twice. And so it's that need of like examining of like, remember what it was on the outside and then the inside. Like, and that's for some habitual sin in my life that I've worked on, is to realize of like, when I've sinned, starting to examine and reflect back of like, where was I after the fact? Like, where was my spirit? How did I feel? And it's never better,
So you mean in a way the temptation is, or the tool is, when the temptation comes, you would think about other times you've given into it and how that felt down the road. And that's another reason to say no to it, or another tool to say no to it
so
at this
almost
moment.
the idea of flipping it on its head of, instead of before past history being, well, why even try, and laying them in, but past history as examination of like, no, this is gross and not good for my life. And
I know the hurt that this is going to cause
exactly.
later on.
And so using that to give me courage to give a different answer, right?
Yeah.
Or to resist, or to shut that door and lock the window.
Exactly.
as the analogy.
And so maybe to read some of the questions that I gave her. And so we're talking about our third option when sin knocks on the door is we don't want to just open the door and let it in. Slamming the door sometimes doesn't work. So then the third tool was to interrogate. And that's kind of what we've been talking about. But some of the questions I put down here, and imagine this sort of symbolically of when the temptation comes, but what are you doing here? Who invited you? Because that gets to think, well, where is this temptation coming from? Why is it so strong in me? What makes you think you'd be welcome here? So like, what is there in my way of life that is like welcoming this in? Why do you think you have a place here? So what, because usually if we're having a temptation, there's some sort of a need we have that it's filling. So there is a reason that it's there and that it's so strong. So what is that? But then to do it, and I do want to be clear in the homily and here too, that we're not asking these questions to justify sin. Because sometimes that can happen too. To say, well, I'm so lonely and that's why I'm doing this. And I can say those words as an excuse to keep on doing it, or I can say those words as an insight to help be free of it. But a lot depends on our goal when we're coming to understand it.
Yeah, I like that. Those are some really good questions. And it's that orientation of saying, I'm trying to have insight to develop my battle plan, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up, it's like people talk about a lot with habits and different stuff, like what is your activation triggers, like in good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Is even how I go to the grocery store, that I walk past the bakery when I don't always need to go past the bakery. I always end up buying Danishes. Like, so maybe some days, like learning.
Just don't go by the bakery.
You start to notice things like that. Or to say, like, if I go to the grocery store and I didn't have lunch, I'm going to buy a snack that I'm going to eat in the car home. Like, that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Like, but so you start to notice, but to say, yeah, I'm going to learn this insight so that I learn to eat before I go, or to walk a different way, or whatever. Is what's the intention? And just as I love those questions you gave, but the one that I kind of just latched onto me was like, who invited you?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that gets to me a little bit. Is not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, I invite the sin in.
Yeah, in some way.
And that, and again, twofold, right? That could lead to a lot of shame, and just like, look at me, I'm awful. I invited in.
Yeah.
But I can also look at it as an empowering thing to say, if I invited you in, I can also
stop inviting you.
Yeah. Like maybe that seems very simple, but that's pretty profound to me.
Yeah.
Is coming to that realization of to say, if I invite it in, I also have the ability to not welcome it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's two parts of this, the freedom at this point, once we start the interrogation, to use that language still. And we've been talking a lot, and I think well on our role in it. Like we have the self-knowledge and the techniques and the tools that we draw on, and that is key in building the virtues and the strengths and the prayer to stay away from it. And that's the one key piece. And then the second piece always, of course, is God's work in us. And this does tie into that as well, because we were starting to talk on, too, the images of our brokenness and our belovedness. Mm-hmm. That as we start to see, like, well, who invited you? Well, what is the hurt in me that's inviting this sin? And then as I come to see that, then to have the courage to bring that to the light, to bring that to the Lord, and to trust him not to, not to turn away from us in anger or disgust when we show it, but to turn to us in love and healing when we show it.
Yeah, and it's brokenness and belovedness is so tied together, but there is this sense of both of those reign at the same time throughout my life, but it's when I'm honest with my brokenness that I've only grown. That's maybe not even the right language. I've only grown in my understanding of my belovedness. I can't get more beloved than I probably already am. But when I understand my brokenness and I come to the Lord, like he reveals how beloved I am.
Yeah.
That I grows in that when I live in that knowledge or that experience, which often for me, frankly, and our church is in the grace of the sacraments. Yeah. Is when his love is poured out upon us in such a tangible way. And that sacramental grace works in our life, and it's out of belovedness that I find strength, right? But usually I only get there through the path of surrender. I was saying, Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. The Jesus prayer. That's why that's a big one in my life. Is like it goes. That to me is like the shortest phrase in my prayer life of like brokenness, belovedness, and you're the link mercy. In between.
And I like that you made the point too that you don't. That's how you grow in knowing your belovedness is in the brokenness too, and that's so true because often, even in like human relationships, is really when someone sees like the parts of ourselves that we're not proud of, and still loves us. Like that's when you see how deep and how real it is, and it is true in our relationship with God as well.
Yeah, and I mean we see little examples of that in parents and how they love their children, and that little testing your parent, and then they don't give up on you and pushing through or reconciling through a fight. And same with the spouse is like, we've both been on both sides of the coin. I'm sure Sharon and I could share stories of like, I was like, I've tried everything in my power, to push you away, and yet you're still there, or you come back, or you forgive, and there's just a beauty to that. And I love this sense, and even going back to that St. Paul line of like him proclaiming his brokenness, but to say like, I need you, Lord, right? To show me that you're beloved. Like that is my path through this, you know?
Yeah.
I might even, have that understanding. I'm at the door. I've asked the questions, you know, I've done the interrogation. I know what it needs to do, but I literally can't close this door on my own.
Yeah.
You know, that I need your hand with mine.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty to that just level of honesty, you know.
Oh yeah. And I think part of the honesty too is, and there's a humility in recognizing our weakness as well. I was thinking this earlier when you were talking about, you know, going to the grocery store. If I walk by the bakery, I'm going to buy danishes. Like I acknowledge that. And yeah, so sometimes it's easy if we don't have the humility to think, well, this time I'm going to be strong. I'm going to walk by the bakery. Probably not. But then to have the humility to say, no, like I can't do that right now. And I imagine like a more serious issue than danishes, right? But to say, no, if I put myself in this situation, I'm probably going to fall. So just have the humility to say, at this point, that is just the reality. So I'm going to stay away from it instead of this false bravado that I can do it and I'll be fine.
Yeah, and
when I never have been before. No.
Me and danishes, it's an ongoing thing. But there's also this reality of like for different sins and struggles in your life that where I've been really actively invited the Lord's, you know, grace and strength to say like, I can't navigate this without you.
Mm-hmm.
And if that becomes a rhythm over and over again, slowly I can find that it's like, okay, I can maybe get closer to the danishes or go in there. Yeah. But there's also seasons of life and there's rhythms and also just that understanding of like, the reality is often I go back to some sins, even if I've overwhelmed them in this, and that could be a tripping point of where you feel like all your hard work is done.
Yeah.
And I've caught myself in that too, and to say like, but my effort and my work is only a small part of the equation.
Yeah.
Right. The bigger I don't even know the right words for it, but it's like my part of this equation is a lot smaller than God's grace.
Right.
You know, they both are there.
Yeah. And both need to be there, but it's good to keep on to put the first thing first, I guess, than the bigger part, to know which is the bigger part.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to do as I collect my brain on it is when I understand that proportion, is it's a lot easier for me not to totally fall off the wagon or to pick myself up again and go to the Lord when I understand that it's more on his strength and not my own.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm very stuck into my routines, my challenges and this, and then I fail, well, then it feels like I'm done for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the real challenge for this. This is message this week, I guess, is bringing ourselves to the light, like seeing that truth, and in that seeing our weakness, seeing our potential for freedom, seeing our role, seeing the Lord's role, and just bringing that all together and trusting the Lord to keep on building this freedom in us that he wants us to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not to be, to go to the gospel that
go right ahead and go to the gospel. That's please
pull
do.
those right away.
Yeah.
But this idea of of the blind man and the story of like to not be afraid to see. Does that sound weird? You might see things that you don't want to see in your life when you examine, when you interrogate. But that it's even in that language, right? That when Jesus gave sight to this blind man, it was a gift, but it was also a call to action.
Yeah.
And maybe as we examine our hearts here a bit more in Lent and approach Easter, to say like, I'm not going to be afraid of what I find, because that is meant to be brought to the light. That's meant to be brought to Christ, right? And Christ wants to do more in my life.
Yeah.
And why should
And
I
it's not as though he doesn't already see it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But it's just a matter of us being willing to acknowledge that and put it before him.
Exactly. Yeah. He's just waiting for the offering in a certain sense. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Any other parting shots for us, Father Matt?
We'll see what we got next week. Raising of Lazarus. And see how that's another example of freedom.
There we go.
Yeah.
Just, and then I guess Palm Sunday right after that.
Yeah.
Lent is flying
Coming
by.
soon.
But exciting stuff. We're excited to see a lot more of you this weekend. We're going up to 150, so that's that's good news. We're excited for that, and continue to pray for each other and just hold each other in solidarity and encouragement of don't be afraid to interrogate that sin. And make sure you close your window if you close your door too.
There you go. Amen. Thanks.
Until next week, God bless.